which I have no interest in God at all, or in religion at all. But the guy was amazing. He was reciting the Bible, supposedly. You didn't know, it looked like he was reading. Then when you approach, he was not reading, he was just reciting in such a fragmented way that it got your attention immediately. It got your attention not about God, but about what he was doing. And then he started to play guitar on top of it. And the guitar was completely out of tune, and the whole thing became very meaningful. And I'm like, maybe the voice of God is closer to that than this like high, strong preaching of a code that I have in a church close to me, another Latino church. So being opening the ears to these kind of experiences, to listening to things in general, is very important to then listen to something that has been produced, that has been done as art. And in that way, for me, anything that has to do with sound, anything, be it a song, or be it the reading of a poem, the background should be a background of absolute freedom. And absolute freedom means from anything that the throat can produce to any composition related with instruments or with anything that's around you. Silence is also part of that absolute freedom. That's a background, but again, that's only the background. In front of that, there's the other side, which is the different codes. Let's say now talking about poetry, different codes of recitation. You can have like a regular kind of traditional way of recitation, which is good. You can have slam poetry, which is good. You can have performative kind of recitation, which in the 70s became also kind of a code. And they're good, but in some way they're already there. So what happens? You go to slam poetry, and I go sometimes in New York, of course, to the New York Cafe. And I like it, because it's very intense, it's very entertaining, but then you sit down and you're like, okay, what happened here? What happened here is that I'm listening to a code, and I'm listening to a personal addition to that code. But that's it. Not much more going on there in terms of sound, even with the best one of them. The meaning, of course, of the poetry, which is sometimes very often connected to social issues, is stronger than what's going on with the sound. No? Why? Because the code is being repeated over and over again, and it's gone. So absolute freedom on the one hand. On the other hand, it's the codes, the different codes of recitation. Like, and one of them is a traditional way of recitation. Like if I write, you know Garcia Lorca, the Granadinian poet, is from my city too. So if I go... You know any poem by him? Poeta de Nueva York. La Oda no. But if I use, hay un poema que se llama Soneto de la Dulce Queja. Y el poema va así. Tengo miedo a perder la maravilla de tus ojos de estatua y el aliento que de noche me pone en la mejilla, la solitaria rosa de tu acento. Tengo miedo a no ser en esta orilla, tronco sin ramas, y lo que más siento es no tener la flor, pulpa o arcilla para el gusano de mi sufrimiento. Si tú eres el tesoro oculto mío, si eres mi amor y mi dolor mojado, si soy el perro de tu señorío, no me dejes perder lo que he ganado y decora las aguas de tu río con hojas de mi otoño enajenado. You all felt that, I'm sure, and you liked it, I'm sure. But, and I'm reading it very well, and I'm not even reading it, but again, I'm just doing something that it's happening kind of inside a code. My question is, how do we explore what's in between? Having the background of absolute freedom, knowing that there are codes, how do we explore in between? How do we give a direction to that translation into sound of a poem? And I think for me, it has a lot to do with that I'm not translating the product. I'm translating the process, the creative process that's inside the poem. Now, good, great, you're translating the process. What does that mean? How do you bring a direction to a process? And there sometimes it's just intuition, like there's something going on in the poem that brings you to certain sounds. Sometimes you really want to build up a mood or a change in moods. Sometimes you do kind of a device in which certain things are going to happen, no? But it's different to have when I say direction, I don't mean this is going here. It's kind of an abstract way of using the word direction. To go back to the wide open sensitivity about sound, I'm going to play you a little bit of it's an interview. You know John Cage? Well, you're going to know him now. Famous American musician, poet. He's a main figure since the 50s, 60s. And this is him doing a little interview. And this is what he says.
When I hear what we call music, it seems to me that someone is talking, and talking about his feelings or about his ideas of relationships. But when I hear traffic, the sound of traffic here on 6th Avenue, for instance, I don't have the feeling that anyone is talking. I have the feeling that sound is acting. And I love the activity of sound. What it does is it gets louder and quieter, and it gets higher and lower, and it gets longer and shorter. It does all those things which I'm completely satisfied with that. I don't need sound to talk to me. We don't see much difference between time and space. We don't know where one begins and the other stops. So that most of the arts we think of as being in time, and most of the arts we think of as being in space. Marcel Duchamp, for instance, began thinking of thinking of music as being not a time art, but a space art. And he made it a piece called Sculpture Musicale, which means different sounds coming from different places and lasting, producing a sculpture which is sonorous and which remains. People expect listening to be more than listening. And so sometimes they speak of inner listening, or the meaning of sound. When I talk about music, it finally comes to people's minds that I'm talking about sound that doesn't mean anything. That is not inner, but is just outer. And they say, these people who understand that finally say, you mean it's just sounds? Thinking that for something to just be a sound is to be useless. Whereas I love sounds, just as they are. And I have no need for them to be anything more than what they are. I don't want them to be psychological. I don't want a sound to pretend that it's a bucket, or that it's president, or that it's in love with another sound. I just want it to be a sound. And I'm not so stupid either. There was a German philosopher who's very well known, Immanuel Kant, and he said there are two things that don't have to mean anything. One is music, and the other is laughter. Don't have to mean anything, that is, in order to give us very deep pleasure. You know that, don't you? The sound experience, which I prefer to all others, is the experience of silence. And the silence almost everywhere in the world now is traffic. If you listen to Beethoven or to Mozart, you see that they're always the same. But if you listen to traffic, you see it's always different.
Yeah. What do you think about that? That's him too. It's quite a radical take on sound, and it's a very good example of what I'm telling you, like a wide open sensitivity of absolute freedom, without organization, without anything. Cage, it was very interesting in all those things, the randomness, like breaking the idea of constructing, of building sound. For me, that has to be the background. It's not enough. It's not enough. The whole chaotic background is good, but something has to be done into that, but something that cannot be just transformed into a code. And it's a very fragile area there. Sí. You have a question?
Yeah, I guess so. You talked about sound as just being sound.
Mm-hmm.
And then he referenced Kant. And I thought, well, I thought he was going to say something about a thing in itself.
No.
Perceiving a thing in itself. And then he said something about music and laughter not really having meaning. But I guess I'm just curious to hear more about poetry, or your poetry, just because it seems like using words at all usually carries with it some implication of meaning and sort of, and so that kind of often overshadows trying to feel something new or hear something new, and sort of being open to
Exactly.
new sound.
It's very tricky. Word is very tricky. It's very easy to do a song. It's very easy to recite a poem, like I just did. Maybe not so easy, but kind of easy. If you believe you can do it, you do it. But the word is very tricky. Visual artists have all the problems. Yeah? I'm gonna get to that. I want to do the wave of keep doing a little bit the sound experiment, and then I'll move into the poem towards sound and the grain of the voice. The bard text you had. Okay, let's listen to this. 1 second. Not 1 second, couple of minutes. All right. Are you getting the sound back there? Okay, I hope you get this one too. So,
I think if this is art, I mean, whatever that means,
mm,
then life is art, and whatever you walk into,
mm,
like if 75th Street is art, the sound of 75th Street art. I mean, but there are many visuals of places like this as well. Then the detail of anything
mhm,
is art.
yeah. Which is the situation nowadays is that one, really. You cannot,
And it's been situation,
since Duchamp, for me.
well, and I don't know, look at realism, the whole 19th century. The avid desire of the freaks like Tolstoy, Zola, Theodor Dreiser, take them all, to be able to catch something that is life as it is, realism, something real,
Mm.
right? Kind of to be able. Well, he didn't have camera, poor old man. As a film camera, photo just emerged. He didn't have that wonderful device stolen from my husband, basically, the lamp clock that amplifies things. I mean Tolstoy. So all he had was words to describe her as real, Anna Arkadyevna Karenina, with every imperfection of her face, figure, voice, and character. Right. What is the difference between 42nd Avenue and Anna Arkadyevna Karenina if your task is to catch them as they are? So it's a question.
Craft. There's a difference, though. There can be a difference.
Of course.
In terms of, a stupid example like reality television versus actors portraying the story. There's a difference there. It's a craft, and I still can appreciate an old play being performed 1,000 times. It still seems different to me based on what the performance given.
Yeah, but that's already there's some, construction going on here. This is not. I mean, what you're saying, yeah, that's a rule. The problem with that today and in visual arts, it's radical, much more than when in poetry. It's not so easy because people still there's a reluctance to accept that you can even go that free. But nowadays, that's a rule. There's nothing special about me saying that this is art. Which this is a recording not from 42nd Street, but from Stack Street with Lorimer, which is my house. In the window, and I just put the iPod and I recorded that the other day because it was sounding very good. And if you listen to this with the headphones, you'll probably get a very different experience. It will not make it more artistic, but will be closer to my question, which is not about if this is art or not, which for me that's not really a question anymore. Anything can be art. Now, how do we deal with that? How do you relate to this as sound? What happened?
I started visualizing what would create those sounds.
Mm-hmm.
It can evoke a certain feeling or kind of
Mm-hmm.
maybe a past experience.
Right. Which I'm just putting the iPod there.
Yeah.
So anything that John Cage was saying before about detaching, like trying to the experience of sound in itself, if innate nature doesn't give it to us so much. Not because of nature, but because we have a propension to immediately put images, to build on those little elements, feelings, meanings. So that for me is the answer to the everything is art. Yes, but if everything is art, then we're still our senses are not being re-educated. We're just going over and over again to the same place where we were. That's a problem for me with the rule of what do you do with that? Then you have to work with sound. You have to bring a direction. You have to do something with it. That's not just doing it as it is. And now I'm going to play a piece, and this is a piece by a contemporary musician, composer called Marcelo Toledo. He's Argentinian. and this is the piece. So I'm just gonna play it. Here, yeah, I mean, it's with the amplification here might not be the best. You're gonna have to pay attention to it. Only thing I'm gonna play it only once. Normally I would play this twice. I would give it to you, and then you listen with the headphones, and then you tell me. Listen to it. Try not to superimpose metaphors. Stop being visual. Try to listen to the sound. In terms of rhythm, timbre, no, the quality of sound. What Roland Barthes was talking in the text. Try to just listen to the sound. It's a 4 minutes piece.